and then they give a little increase every year. So the state funding system is so out of whack right now, where some districts have lost, hundreds and hundreds of kids, but they still get like the funding they got when they had the higher populations in 1991. Some school districts barely tax. Some school districts, you tax at a pretty high rate up here. You do, you know what I mean? You've done a good job as a community in supporting your schools. That should be rewarded. So school districts that are taxing at a fairly high rate, school districts that have students with high needs, students who live in poverty, students who are English language learners, those students cost more to educate. So what the Basic Education Funding Commission did was it was a group of bipartisan lawmakers. They came together and they said, we have a formula, and what this formula is going to do is it's going to drive state taxpayer dollars out to school districts based on what it actually costs to educate kids and based on how much a community can afford to pay. And if they're already paying a lot, then we're going to take that into account, and we're not going to penalize them for that. We're going to actually send money their way. So it's a good formula. That is hanging in limbo right now because the state can't pass its budget. And this would be like a grand step forward in Pennsylvania in starting to allocate money to where it really needs to go to make funding equitable, because we have the most inequitable funding system in Pennsylvania in the country, where the wealthiest school districts that have the really huge, nice, big tax bases, they can afford to tax and they can afford to spend $20,000–$25,000 a student. The poorest school districts, they can't afford to do that. So you have school districts that spend $10,000 or $11,000 a student. And the poorest school districts educate the poorest kids, and the richest school districts educate the richest kids. So we've got this problem in Pennsylvania where we've got this gap, and that gap needs to be closed because we really can't shortchange children just because they happen to live in an area where the tax base can't afford to raise enough money to pay to educate them in a way that they deserve. So, and we say, why is advocacy important? Well, our state lawmakers make really, really important decisions, and they make decisions based on what they hear from the people that they represent. And so if people talk to lawmakers and say, it is really important for us to have a great and strong school system so that our children can graduate and go out and do whatever they want in the world and be successful and go compete with kids from every place around the state and around the country, then lawmakers know that that's a priority for the community. It really, really makes a difference. They care about what people think of them in the community. Do people think they're doing a great job? They care, the media cares about what people think. So advocacy works in a lot of different ways. It works talking to lawmakers. It works when you like to engage the media in issues. And we know how people think based on how they act and what they do. So I think being an advocate can be sometimes really intimidating, but I learned from being that stay-at-home mom to doing this that it really isn't. That if you can be yourself, and that you know what you know about your situation, about your schools, about your children, about your taxes. You know that you are an expert in that in a way that no one else can be. And you just kind of have to be able to focus on a couple issues that are really important to you. And you have to, when you're doing this, whether you're talking to a lawmaker or writing a letter to the editor, you just have to have a clear ask, like, what is it that you want? So that you can talk to them. And it can be kind of hard to talk to people and you don't see change, but you can't get discouraged because it all does make a difference. Activities that we do, and I can say that in our area, I did not 5 years ago know who my state senator was. I didn't. We were divided down the county lines, and I didn't know who my state senator was. But I learned who my state senator was, and I regularly talk to my lawmakers now about this issue. So when you do advocacy, you can call your elected officials. Calling them on the phone makes a big difference. If you have the time and you can meet with them in their district offices and sit and talk face to face, that's a really good way for them to understand that you are interested and that you care. You can write to them. Letters to the editor. Do you have a local paper up here that people read? That goes
There's
to
a
your
local
like,
paper,
your
but
community?
whether they read it or not, another
But
question.
I guess that goes to, is it distributed to people's homes in the area? Like, they don't have to buy it, but it gets delivered to their houses?
Well, Wayne Independent, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
very independent.
Well, they oftentimes small newspapers love
Right.
to to have letters to the editor and love to have stories printed that you can create. So writing a letter to the editor to your local paper about your local school district issues is really a good idea. You can get community events, and you can do community events like this, and then getting other people involved, even just talking to your friends and neighbors is really, really something, and it seems like Amanda has done just an excellent job of building up a community of people who are engaged and who really care and who understand these issues. So we've got a little one-page handout over there, but how many people have talked to your state representative or your state senator? Yay! Well, and you're very lucky because you have Senator Lisa Baker, and she is reasonable. Like there are like the lawmakers who are reasonable, and then there are some who just really aren't. And you have reasonable, good lawmakers up here. And you also have Representative Piper, who's very good, and then your other representative is
Sandy.
She's retiring, and so you're gonna get somebody new, so I don't know about that person. But when we were with the Campaign for Fair Education funding, we look around and we look at lawmakers and we talk about which lawmakers need to hear from local people in their districts because we know that they will listen. And you actually are in a district where you have two, which is very lucky. So, you know, it's good if you call them, you can just call them on the phone and you can just kind of introduce yourself, say what you're calling about, you know, and ask for a follow-up response. And so with the budget stalemate, a lot of lawmakers are saying, well, we're not hearing anything. You know, people don't really care about education funding. So we're, you know what I mean? We did what we wanted to do, we did it right, nobody cares, we're fine. So sometimes getting a couple of phone calls from people can make them, you know, rethink how people are thinking about their actions. Writing a letter to the editor, you know, it's good to just write a little letter to the editor about what's happening in your schools when you see, are you going to have to raise taxes again? Are you going to cut programs? What is happening in your school district that is important that you want people to know about? And it's really easy to write a letter to the editor, and it's kind of fun because people then will read it, and then, you know, you go to the grocery store and people are talking about your issue, and that's always a good thing too. So that's a good way to inform people. And then, you know, if your lawmakers, I don't know if your lawmakers have public events around here and if you're able to go, but if they do have public events, it's always good to show up and be able to talk to them so that they see that people are paying attention. So it depends on your schedule and how available they make themselves, but being able to go to their meetings is a very good thing. And then getting other people involved is good. So if you're gonna make a phone call, if you've got a neighbor and you talk about school issues, talking to your neighbor and saying, hey, will you make this phone call too? And one thing that Education Voters does with the Campaign for Fair Education funding, we pay attention to what's happening in Harrisburg, and then we'll send out an alert. And we'll say, today is the day, we are all gonna make phone calls. And it's kind of fun because we have a very, very large network of people, and by the end of the day, when you call your lawmaker, their staff is oftentimes a little cranky, and then you can tell that they've been getting a lot of phone calls, and that means that they're hearing from enough people that they understand that it's an important issue, that this education issue is important, and that people are paying attention. And so how much time does it take? It can take as much time as you have. So if all you can do is make a phone call, it takes 10 minutes to think about what you want to say, and it takes about 5 minutes to make the phone call. You know, you can make a phone call once a month. It doesn't hurt to think about, I'm just going to put it on my calendar and I'm going to call my lawmaker once a month, especially since it's been 7 months and the budget isn't passed yet. It doesn't hurt to call your lawmaker once a month and say, hey, still waiting for you to pass the budget. We really need we need a funding formula that's going to send money to Western Wayne the way it should come here. And we'd really like to see a significant increase in state funding so that, you know, our school district doesn't keep moving backward. You know, just short little messages are really good. If you can make a visit to the local office, that's even better. Seeing people face to face and sitting across and telling your story, like really just telling the story of who you are, why you care, and why it's important for them to support your schools has a huge impact. And then you can just, you know, you decide what works for you, and then you can just kind of go from there. So our priorities with Education Voters, we want fair funding. We want the Basic Education Funding Commission formula to be passed so that money goes out to where it should be going out. The other thing that they do in Harrisburg is they create without the funding formula, really powerful legislators can create their own little formulas so they can cite